Good day, ma'am. Good day, classmates. We are the group 3 and our topic is subject and content of arts. So, subject. It is the main focus of object in the work of art, whereas the content is the overall meaning of the piece. So, in addition, the subject can appear in the center of the piece or any other part of it, but it is always the most recognizable thing in the art, regardless of its size. This center of attention will be recognized whether it is commonly known thing or because it can be seen in context alongside the rest of the work of art. For example, in a photograph of a dog running on the beach, the dog could be the subject because it is the most recognizable component in the picture. The next is content of art. The emotional or intellectual message of a work of art is its content, a statement, expression, or mood developed by the artist and interpreted by the observer. Content is also the message given by the piece of art. It involves the subject, the techniques used to make the piece, the colors used, and anything that was used by the artist is make a statement and give a message. Content is also the message given by the piece of art. It involves the subject, the techniques used to make the piece, the colors used, and anything that was used by the artist is make a statement and give a message. So, in the same example of the subject, a photograph of a dog running on the beach, the content could be the dog's hair moving in the air, its tongue coming out, the white sand, or even a warm light from the sun. It allows to give the message that the dog feels free and happy running outside. So, content is the overall meaning or message of the work of art. Subject of art is the most common subjects of art include people, portraiture, arrangements of objects, still file, the natural world landscape, and abstractions, non-objective. So, in addition, subject of arts refers to any person, object, scene, or event described or represented in a work of art. Perspective is a point of view. In a way, it's regarding something through specific filter. Each perspective or filters has unique characteristics that direct how something is considered. Next is context or contextual knowledge relates to perspective in that all perspectives are shaped by the circumstances around them that constitute a kind of background they form within.
There are three basic types of perspective. First is the cultural perspective. Culture is a complex concept that encompasses the way that social life affects and informs our experiences. In addition, the cultural perspective is viewing a situation through the eye of individuals' native environmental and social influences. Example, hospitable. Filipinos are known for being welcoming and friendly and so much respect to the elderless. And the second is historical perspective. Understanding the social, culture, intellectual, and emotional settings that shape people's lives and action in the past. If we talk about historical perspective, this is a timeline where we will travel back in the time to know more about our country's history in art. Example, during pre-colonial time, where was already indigenous spiritual tradition practiced by the people in the Philippines. Their practices was a collection of belief and cultural by the idea that world is inhabited by the spirit and supernatural entities. And the third is personal perspective. Personal perspective are formed by the layered aspect that form our individual identities. This could be any number of defining aspects such as gender, class, race, where you were born and raised, education, aspect of family, group affiliation, etc., and the list goes on. In additional, personal perspective often do include empirical information and research insights, and also personal perspective is to bring the unique thoughts, opinions, and emotion of the writer to the wider world. Contextual information. Contextual information can deepen and or improve our understanding of an artwork. With some additional contextual information about the time, the culture, and the maker, artist of an artwork, we can become more informed. All artwork exists in a context. More accurately, all artwork exists in multiple contexts. Historical context. Time is the most basic and first context we considered. When we say, when in the time, the question is also related to where in time. Artist context. Through this kind of context is often ignored in more recent trend of visual research. The context for the artist or creator includes their culture, place, geography, and personal perspective or world review, aspect unique to their identity. Viewing context, the social setting within which an audience encounters in a text in any medium.
And now let's talk about critical modalities. So when we heard the word critical or criticism, it is an analysis and judgment of the merits and faults of a literary and artistic work. So there are 6 critical modalities. The first one is structural criticism. Structuralism is based on the notion that our concept of reality is expressed through language and related system of communication. On a larger scale, visualize culture as a structure whose foundation is language, speech, and other forms of communication. So structural, from the root word structure, it is expressed through language. The second one is deconstructive criticism. The second one is deconstructive criticism from the root word deconstruct. It is a criticism posits an undecidability of meaning for all the text. The text has intertwined and contradictory discourses, gaps, and incoherences since language itself is unstable and arbitrary. The critic doesn't undermine the text already dismantles itself. So it is a the language itself is unstable and arbitrary. The third one is formalist criticism from the root word formal. Formalism is what we engage in when we look at the elements and principles of art. Formalism doesn't really care about what goes on outside the actual space of the work but finds meaning in its use of materials. Formalism allows a more reasoned discussion of abstract and non-representational art because we can approach them on their own terms, where the subject matter becomes the medium instead of something it represents. Formalism is what we engage when we look at the elements of the principles in the art. The fourth one is ideological criticism. Ideological criticism is most concerned with the relationship between the art and structures of the owner. It infers the art is embedded in a social, economic, and political structure that determines its final meaning. So it is concerned with the relationship between art and structures of the power. The fifth one is psychoanalytic criticism. Psychoanalytic criticism is the way we should look at the artwork if we feel it is only about personal expression. The purest form of this criticism ranks the work of untrained and mentally ill artists as being just important as any other art. It is in the way that the artist inside is more important than any other reason the art happens or the effect the art has. Psychoanalytic is that the purest form of criticism ranks the work. And the last one is feminist criticism. Feminist criticism began in the 1970s as a response to the neglect of women artists over time and in historical writings. This form of criticism is specific to viewing art as an example of gender bias in a historical Western European culture and views all work as a manifestation of this bias.
So let's move on to the analyzing symbols. First is iconography, means of expanding beyond formal analysis and focusing on analyzing subject matter in artwork. Specifically, symbols whose meaning is understood by a people or culture in that specific time. So, the artist used image to convey particular meanings. For example, in Christian religious painting, there is an iconography of images such as dove that represents Holy Spirit, or another example is lamp, which represents Christ. So next is semiotics. Semiotics offers another way of analyzing images. Be they found in artwork or another type of visual culture, like advertising. Semiotic is the study of signs. In semiotics, the basic unit is the sign. Signs are representations that have meanings beyond what they literally represents. So, the semiotics is the study of how ideas or object communicates meaning and what meaning it communicates, because the science is also a medium of communication. So they need to study the different signs so that they will know what signs should be used or what signs should be avoided. So the next is signified and signifier. The signs in an image are analyzed into two parts, the signified and signifier. The signified is the concept or thing the representation stands in for. The signifier is the representation. So, the signifier is the thing, item, or code that we read. So, signifier is the thing, item, or code that we read. So, it can be drawing, a word, or a photo, while signified is the idea or meaning being expressed by that signifier. For example, in a shop doorway, na siya signs nga nakabutang nga open. So a signifier, the word open signified that the shop is open for a business. So the next is icon, index, symbol. There are three basic types of signs: icon, index, and symbol. Icons bear a very close visual relationship to the thing they represent. An icon of a woman might be a photograph of an actual woman. An indexical sign points to the thing it represents or bears some relationship to the thing it represents, but is one step removed. So, icon can be referred to a person, symbol, image, or picture that is widely admired for its conspicuous or all allegiance. Mostly, it refers to a religious painting, usually Jesus, Christ, or another example is holy or other religious figure. Next is index. Describes the connection between signifier and signified. With an index, the signifier cannot exist without the presence of signified. Example, smoke is an index of fire. So the last one is the denotative and connotative meanings. Signs can have denotative or literal meaning and connotative meanings that are in addition to their literal meaning. Signs exist in relationship to other signs. Signs also connect to wider system of meaning that are conventionalized meanings shared by particular groups of people or culture. So in other words, denotative is kanang literal meaning lang siya. So wala siya wala siya literal lang, like for example, denotative blue. So ang iyahang literal meaning is color blue lang, but in connotative the 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 color blue is half the meaning, like a feeling sad. So in other words, connotative is kanang na siya beyond meaning.
Drawing and painting. Drawing. Drawing is a process of portraying an object, scene, or form of decorative or symbolic meaning through lines, shape, values, and texture in one or more colors. This process involves moving a pointed instrument such as pencil, crayon, or stick chalk over a smooth surface, leaving behind the marks of its passage. First is drawing media. Dry media are those media that are applied dry. They include pencil, charcoal, crayon, and chalk or pastel, like the image provide. Wet media are those media in which the coloring agent is suspended in a liquid. They include ink and paints. The wet medium most commonly used in drawing is ink in various colors, applied with pen or brush. Pens can also be used as drawing medium. Next is painting. Painting is one of the oldest and most important of the visual arts. An artist creates a painting by arranging the art element on a flat. Subject matter in art. First is landscapes. Art uses landscapes as backgrounds for their figures. They reject the idea of using natural scene as main subject for their paintings. So the landscape is focusing on the background. Next is nature. During the 17th century, Japanese artists perfected an elegant art style that catered to the demands of a growing number of wealthy landowners. It was the age of bold and decorative screen painting, when painters created dreamlike landscapes set against glowing gold backdrops. So they are using decorative screen and set against glowing gold backdrops. Next is people. Peering out at us from the pages of art history are the countless smiling, frowning, crying faces of the people painted in many different ways. Some are famous and easily recognized, but a great many more are long forgotten and may never have been identified. So there are other people pictures that has been unrecognized nowadays and unable to identify. Next is still lifes painting. So this painting is a still life, an arrangement of inanimate objects such as food, plants, pots, and pans, has appealed to many artists. One of these is the American John Frederick Pito, or read by Pito, delighted in presenting authentic looking object arranged in shallow spaces. So this is the example. Next is historical subjects. Historical pictures were considered the highest form of painting. They often take the form of dynamic, colorful pictures depicting dashes military leaders engaged in epic battles, although it may lack the dynamic. So the example is here. So this is a historical pictures. So it is considered highest form of painting. Next, the media and tools of painting. Pigment. Pigment is finely ground powder that gives a paint its color. Some pigments are produced by chemical processes, other by grinding up some kind of earth, stone, and mineral. Binder is a liquid that holds together the grains of pigment in a form that can be sprayed over a surface. When it is allowed to dry. Some tempera paints uses the white of eggs as a binder. So white of eggs para binder is to hold to make the pigment strong. So next is solvent. Solvent is the material used to thin the binder. So ginapagamay ang binder. So make the binders thin. Brushes are by far the preferred tools for painters. These come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Pointed or flat, short and steep, or long and flexible. Next is printmaking. Printmaking is an Printmaking is an artistic process based on the principles of transferring images from a matrix into another surface, most often paper or fabric. So, printmaking is using using a principle to transfer an image to another paper or fabric. Next is relief printing. In relief printing, the image to be printed is raised from the background. This method requires that the artist cut away the sections of a surface not meant to hold ink, and the remaining raised portion is then covered with ink and become the printing surface. Paper is laid on it, pressure is applied, and the ink is transferred to the paper. Okay. Next is intaglio, a printing process that is exactly the reverse of relief printing is intaglio. The name comes from the Italian word meaning to cut into. Intaglio is a process in which ink is forced to fill lines cut into a metal surface. The lines of a design are created by one of two methods, etching or engraving. So they are engraving the surface and put an ink in it. Next is lithography. Lithography is a printmaking method in which the image to be printed is drawn on limestone, zinc, or aluminum with a special greasy crayon. So this is the example picture. Next is screen printing. In screen printing, paint is forced to a screen into paper or fabric. This technique uses a stencil placed on a silk or synthetic fabric screen stretched across a frame. The screen is placed on the printing surface and the squeegee is used to force the ink through the porous fabric in areas not covered by the stencil. A serigraph is a screen print that has been handmade by an artist. So you can put an there is silk screen and cut paper, then you will put any kind of ink and press it, so screen printing will be applied. Next is photography. Photographs appears everywhere, in newspaper, magazines, books, and on the internet. In fact, their popularity may be one of the main reasons why photography has or had difficult being accepted as a serious art form. Photography is a technique of capturing optical images on light sensitive surface, and best photographers use this technique to create an art form powerful enough to teach others how to see, feel, and remember. So they are referring photography as an acceptable form of art.
Video and digital media. So, video technology The artist used a video camera loaded with cassette of videotapes to record images, patterns of light beams from the subject or objects being videotaped are translated into electric waves, which are then imprinted magnetically on the videotapes. Artists can use a video cassette recorder to immediately play back the tape. So, video technology is more on the recorded video with the use of cassette. Cassette is something like inani bito nga nasa picture nga example kaning nasa lower. This is an example of cassette. So, digital media is any type of materials that can be processed by a computer. So, the example of digital medias are social media, softwares, video games, and websites that we usually seen in online. Sculpture. Sculpture is the action of art of making statue by carving or chiseling, which is using of woods or stone, and by modeling using in clay or casting with the use of melted metal. So, when we go deeper of this topic, sculpture is something that we should be more learning. We should learn more about sculpture. The picture is an example of relief sculpture. So this painting is Madonna and Child within an art made 15th century. It is a bas relief example. In high relief, the sculpture form extended boldly out into space. So the difference between the low relief and high relief is that the low relief is something that it was very not easily determined or not easily viewed, while the high relief is something that we usually see the details of the painting and the sculpture that forms within. So, sculpture in a round. Sculpture in the round is a freestanding work surrounded in all sides by space. Not all freestanding sculptures are meant to be seen from all sides. However, many are designed to be viewed only from the front, much like painting or relief sculpture. Sculpture in a round is something like we usually see the different the different standing or the different position of the painting or the sculpture. You can see the different direction of it. You can see the different process of sculpture. So there are a lot of ways and processes of sculpture. The first is modeling. Modeling is a process in which a soft, playable materials is built up and shaped into structural form. The artist uses a material such as clay, wax, and plaster. So, in modeling, the artist uses materials like clay, wax, and plaster. So, when we say modeling, it is something that a sculpture that we can we can bend or fold easily. Next is carving. So carving is a cutting or shaping a form from a given mass of materials to create a sculpture. Unlike modeling, which is an adductive technique, carving is subtractive. Materials is removed until the sculpture is completely exposed. So carving is, we all know that carving is something like we are given some amount of materials. Carving is something we uses wood to create some art out of specific amount of woods that we use to create form of art. So next is casting. In casting, a melted down metal or other liquid substance is poured into a mold to harden. So in carving, we uses wood, and in modeling, we uses clay. In casting, we uses some metal to form arts with by carving it or liquiding the metal to form another art from that liquid substance of metal. So lastly is assembly. Assembly is usually the artist gathers and joins together a variety of different materials to construct a three-dimensional work of art. So assembly is something like um, we can um, we can see different arts within a specific arts or a different arts that forms into three-dimensional process of art. So in this art, we usually create some variety of arts that go within its specific value of um, specific view or what we see within the arts we see. Process of assembly, the artists gather and join together a variety of different materials to construct a three-dimensional work of art. So in assembly, we create something that that is three-dimensional work of art. Unlike the other sculpture processes, assembly is a modern technique. So assembly is a three-dimensional technique. Let's go back from the start. So the first one is the first one is modeling. So the modeling talks about the formation of art with the use of clay. Next is the carving. Carving is something that we uses wood to create art, and sa tong isa cast. Next is casting. Casting is something we uses metal. First is we melt the metal down and we create another art forms with the use of that liquid metal. Next is assembly. So the assembly is something like we do three-dimensional work of art. Next is architecture. Architecture is an art and science of designing and constructing structures that enclose space for a variety of human needs. So the first one is post and lintel construction. So the post and lintel construction involves use of vertical and horizontal elements. So in post and lintel construction, we usually see it in building the post kanang bitong poste sa kuan sa kanang poste sa mga balay. It's something like gaana siya o gaana. So the example is here in the picture. Yeah, that is an example of post and lintel construction. So the arc transfer and weight outward from its center or case stone to the vertical support. The use of the variable severally arches placed front to back to enclose space made it possible to construct buildings and stone roofs that would span a wide space as seen in the view of Santa Maria del Naranjo. Dome construction. So the dome construction is something like we usually see in our houses, like mura siya og alkuba bitaw sa balay. So the hemisphere structure usually forming ceiling or kanang roof sa isa ka establishment or isa ka place or isa ka balay. Next is the modern construction process. So in modern construction process, wood framing is one of it. So the wood framing is usually seen when we are building our houses. So the example of wood framing is that picture, and that picture is usually what we see when somebody is building their own houses. We usually see that they have different pillars in their house. So that calls pillars the wood. So yeah, that's an example of pillars. I wood framing. So next is iron and steel frame construction. So iron and steel frame construction uses steel and iron. So the difference between the wood framing and the iron steel framing is that the iron and steel they uses iron and steels, while the wooden framing uses wood to build the pillars of the building or houses. So the one of the example of iron and steel frame is the Eiffel Tower in France, which is one of our favorite places to go. Next is reinforced concrete construction. So the reinforced concrete is which is embodied in such a manner that the two materials act together in resisting forces. So the reinforced concrete construction is the combination of traditional cement concrete with steel bar. So the reinforced concrete construction is something like um, we we connected two different materials to build strong and higher strength of building a construction of a buildings. So next or lastly, the lightweight structural system. So the lightweight structural system, it is the development of lightweight metals and plastics offering contemporary architects new and exciting materials. So ang lightweight structural system is something like the strongest material uses to build a building in construction or structural system. So let me go back from the start. So the modern construction process is the materials and the way of building some houses or buildings. It is also a constructions that consist of different waste and different materials that will build in a stronger way. So wood framing is with the use of woods and iron with the use of woods in a way that we uses it to build pillars in our houses and pillars of the buildings, and iron and steel frame uses to build iron and steel frame for iron and steel for pillars in the buildings. The example is the Paris, and reinforced concrete construction, which is the combination of two materials to build strong and higher strength of the capacity of the building to spend more years. And lastly is the lightweight structural system, which is the something like a membrane of the construction of a building or the cable or the shell, or it is usually made to build the strongest construction building. That would be all. Thank you. So that is the subject and content of art. So I hope everyone learns about it. So thank you for listening. God bless us all. Have a great day.